Okay, welcome. Hello. Thank you for coming. Welcome to my Introduction to Latin and English Paleography workshop. Thank you for participating. My name is Kathryn Brunet, and I am a graduate student at UCLA, graduating in June with a master's in library and information science. I study medieval manuscripts, early printed books, and early modern English history. I love to teach and share history with others, and I thought this workshop would be a lot of fun. So we have a very diverse group of participants today, from academics in various fields, library and museum professionals, history enthusiasts, some of my closest friends who were curious, and even my family is learning with us today. So I'm very grateful for all the support. This is what we're going to be doing today. I am going to be giving you a general introduction to the approaching paleography as a practice, and then I will walk you through some examples I've chosen for each section. There are 2 examples for each hour. In the last 5 minutes, I'll answer any questions you might have, and we can chat a little more casually until the next session will start. Okay, so in our first hour, we have 2 objectives. One is to build, in our second hour now, I guess, we have 2 objectives. The first is to build a little confidence in your own reading abilities when approaching a document. Some of our participants are historians and professionals who work with rare materials already, and some of you are enthusiastic and curious about paleography. Some of you might be both, and this workshop is meant to give you a basic comprehension to apply to any historical documents you might encounter. The second objective is to have fun. We're learning a useful and probably very foreign new skill today. So let's enjoy ourselves and have fun with the challenges presented here. So what is paleography? By definition, paleography is the study and transcription of historical handwriting. Paleography is used to decipher and study historical writing practices and is a general term for studying any culture's writing and reading systems. I'm sure you're ready to get started. Okay, so when we read modern text, we generally identify whole words very quickly at a glance. Our brains assume many words without really processing them. This is a huge problem in paleography. We have to slow our brains down and to look at letters without assuming we know what they are. It's okay to go very slowly when you're transcribing a document. You can skip letters, you can skip words, you can skip the entire line if it's too challenging or if it's really hard to read. We are also looking at copies of copies. So there is going to be some degradation in our documents. Cut yourself some slack for this, it's okay. This is probably your first time really looking at historical documents. And if it's not, each document presents its own challenges, and it will surprise you, even if you are a well-practiced paleographer. So when you encounter a historical document you would like to read or transcribe, context is very important. What time period and location is it from? Who wrote it? What kind of document is it? What language is it in? What is the purpose of it? All of these questions are really good ways to learn about the background of your document. And this information can help you identify the script style, materials used to make the document, and its place in history. So we should talk a little about spelling. Spelling in historical documents is always open for a very generous interpretation. Our first two sessions are looking at Latin documents. Luckily for us, medieval Latin is very standard in a lot of ways, including a very accepted and wide-known set of rules for spelling. So we're a little less worried about spelling for Latin. And just a reminder, if you're unfamiliar with Latin, you can absolutely keep doing this workshop. I learned most of my paleography skills before taking any Latin at all, including taking a class called Latin Paleography with no Latin experience. And I still survived and I learned a ton. So you don't need to know any Latin to get a lot out of this. Our third session deals with the end of Middle English and the beginning of Modern English. With English, all bets are off with spelling. English is not standardized until the 18th century, so the medieval and early modern English documents that we look at today will be full of exciting and completely confounding spelling choices. Get ready, they're pretty cool. Just go with the flow and trust that Geoffrey Chaucer knows how to document his poetry in a way that his scribe would want to write it down. So his scribe may have chosen multiple ways to spell all of the similar words in the Canterbury Tales, which in this next section, session 3, we will look at a piece of the Canterbury Tales. Basically, I advise you to use your knowledge of English to help you figure out what letters you can see. Can an H follow an X? Probably not. So guess another letter. Try to use your context clues and your knowledge of English already as it is. There are a couple unique letter forms I want to bring to your attention. Medieval scribes were just like us when they wrote things down. They were doing it by hand, and there was inevitable variation. You already know 3 versions. Oh, sorry, I skipped a line. Think about your printed letters that you use. Then think about your cursive handwriting, and then think about your writing in uppercase. You already know 3 versions of those letters, and you probably didn't even realize it. Medieval scribes also had versions of letters, and we'll be seeing lots of examples here today. One extremely common example of one letter written in different ways is the letter S. The letter S in medieval documents is written in 2 very common ways. The short S, which we call the sigma S, is very similar to what we write now. It's all on one line and very recognizable. The other way, very common way they wrote S's is called the long S. It's a very long curved line. It often bears a resemblance to our idea of a modern F. And we'll see some short and long S's used interchangeably throughout many of these documents. Okay, so medieval scribes did not dot their I's. If you see something that looks like a dot over an I, it is not a dotted I. Trust me, it's another symbol. Those medieval I's are not dotted. I want to introduce you to the concept of minims. Minims are the downstroke of letters like I, M, N, and U. They can cause some real confusion when there's no dotted I's and there's no real separation between letters. Even when you might think you see a connection on the top and bottom of a letter that looks like it's an M, it could easily be an I and an N instead. So take, for example, this first word on the PowerPoint. It is Mimi, M-I-M-I. But if you look at the minims, it could also be a word full of U's and I's and N's, depending on the order you see them. Getting this stuff takes a lot of time, and eventually you do need to know Latin really well to be able to transcribe things like this. So don't sweat the minims for now. If you see a bunch of downstrokes, you count them, and this is how you can sort of figure out letters without knowing all of the words. You would count Mimi, you would count Mimi 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those are 8 minims in this line. So then you could play with M's, N's, U's, and I's to figure out what kind of words that could make up. Okay, so this is a big one, especially with your exciting Gothic examples in session 2. Medieval Latin is heavily abbreviated. It is one of the biggest hurdles in paleography. Medieval Latin can be really, really hard, and it can take a lot of practice to identify. So there are entire dictionaries of medieval Latin abbreviations, which I showed the people in my last session. This is one of those dictionaries that people use for Latin abbreviations. It's extremely helpful. So why abbreviate this much? It's much faster, especially with an extremely repetitive language like Latin, which has many of the same endings that are used over and over. Readers often already knew the texts, especially if it was religious, so they didn't need all the words spelled out when they needed to say their prayers in Latin. Also, it saves space. Scribes were conserving very expensive materials. Making medieval English books was very time-consuming, labor-intensive, and expensive. So saving space and saving space was saving time and money. All right, here are some examples of Latin abbreviations. Luckily for us, Latin abbreviations are pretty standard in a lot of ways. These are really common ones here. You can see how these 3 P-shaped letters stand for pair or par, pro, and pray. And you can see how they would be, how they would shorten a modern word to make everything abbreviated. Here are examples of some scripts, some medieval scripts. Paleography is not just identifying words, it is also studying script styles and their evolutions through history. This slide shows a few of the many variations of scripts used by scribes from 800 to 1600 in England and Western Europe. For our sessions, I have chosen some of my favorite styles for us to transcribe and investigate, to become more familiar with letter forms, how they were made, how they varied, and when in history they were popular. Now that we've learned about variation in script styles and variation from scribe to scribe in handwriting, I want to introduce you to an extremely useful tool I use when transcribing historical documents. A good practice when transcribing is to record various ways a scribe writes his or her letters. You can use your record to recall letters you've already identified and see the variations between letter forms. You can see this graphic here, which I got from the National Archives in the UK, this modern A, B, and C, and then all the variations that the scribe might use when writing their A, Bs, and Cs. These Cs get really crazy. It's pretty nuts. As soon as I sit down with a document, I write out an alphabet at the top of my transcription page, like this, this image over here on the right. As I decipher letters and words, I will copy the script's letters onto the top of my page. Eventually, I will have an alphabet of the scribe's handwriting, which helps me figure out new words and compare this document to others in historical research. This alphabet can also help me identify script styles and variations unique to that scribe. So that helps you identify, if you're looking at which scribes wrote what things, if you can see little traces of, oh, this scribe does these little tails or does this little flourish, you can start to connect, this scribe wrote more than one thing, and you might be able to identify an entire collection of books that one scribe has worked on. A lot of times scribes shared the responsibilities of making books, though, so it's not all just one scribe's job. Okay, so let's look at some documents. Getting used to scripts and letter forms is something paleographers call getting your eye in. So before we start, remember to break up the words letter by letter. Start with things you recognize and work from those. Identifying letters by what you already know. So think about descenders, things that, letters that take up space below the line, like P, G, and Q. Ascenders, letters that take up space above the line, like L, T, F, and H. These ascenders and descenders are examples of paleographical terminology, and this becomes very useful when you want to describe the letters you're seeing to others and in your own notes. Okay, so these are the documents that we're going to be looking at in this session. If you have paper copies of these documents, go ahead and get those out along with your sheet of lined notebook paper. And on your notebook paper, go ahead and write, you can write your alphabet on top if you'd like. That's sort of a long-term tool. We probably won't have time to go through most of that today, but if you want to go ahead and practice that, if you're interested in the different variations in letters, go ahead and do that alphabet. And then number your lines underneath it 1 to 15. And those will be your transcription lines. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and change over from my presentation to the digital documents that we're gonna look at. Okay, so here we have the first example, which I hope is our most simple example and gives you a little bit of confidence to work through these documents. I chose this one because I think it's a really good beginner example. It's from the 800s, 825 to 850. It's French. It is in a style called Caroline minuscule or Carolingian minuscule, named for the time period that, oh my God, what's his name? Oh no, I can't remember. Okay. And this is a gospel, this is an excerpt from a gospel. Okay, so I'm gonna zoom in pretty close.
Charlemagne.
Thank you, Charlemagne. My nerves are getting to me. That's, yes. So this is, Caroline is an anglicized version of Charlemagne. Okay, so over here on the right, we're gonna zoom in real close to the document. And on the left, I have provided a guide for you. This is not necessarily an alphabet. This is to show you how the letters are made and the general look of the letters on the page. So it helps a lot with paleography if you've done calligraphy, because you start to understand how the pen makes these shapes and how they look together in word form. So we're gonna go ahead and do the first line together, and then I will set you free for a couple lines to see what you come up with. So we're gonna skip this top line here because it's sort of cut off and has an ink splot on it, and I think that would be kind of mean to make you go through that first one. So we're gonna start here with the number 1. This letter is conveniently capitalized for us. At the time, capitalization is not standard, so you never know if this is really capital or not, but this is a capital letter, and this is a familiar one for us. This is an M. It's very round, very curved, and you can see all of these letters on the left side are very round, curved, and take up a lot of space. Caroline minuscule takes up a lot of space. It's very wide. The next letter here is a very recognizable O, and then here you guys are so lucky. I gave the first example of an R. It actually looks like an R. Most of the R's that we're gonna see in other scripts today don't look anything like modern R's, but this one is to make you feel a little bit more confident about looking at R's. So this is a regular shaped R for us. And then here we have a one-chambered A. So this is over here on the left, you can see this is formed with 2 lines, this one downstroke, and then this chamber has a chamber on the bottom and then a hook over the top. This is the way we type A's. This is like a typography A, but this is not really how most people write their A's. And then we have a lowercase m, so very recognizable. Another A, and here we have a U. The U's are very wide, very scoopy, 2 lines here, 1, 2. And here at the end, we have a T. So the lowercase t's in Caroline don't go up into the ascender space, which is up here above. The T's are on the first level with all these other letters, just one scoop and then across the top. It sort of looks like an uppercase T, except shrunk down for our modern eye. And then the last letter here is an E. So this looks very much like you would expect an E to look, but it has a little tail on the end. So this is an example of how we are very quick to think, oh, that looks like an E, it must be an E. So there will be some examples a little later of things that don't look quite like what we would expect, but there's little details that you should start noticing. And one is this tail. This is an E, but the way the scribe makes their E's is always with this tail. And you can see there's one down here as well. And this is another way to learn paleography, is once you start going through a word, you can start scanning for other versions. Here's an E here, here's an E here, here's an E here, and you start to get used to seeing what those E's look like. So above this E, we have a line. And this is our first taste of abbreviations. So I mentioned before that you don't need to know what the abbreviations are in order to do this. That's totally fine. And when you transcribe, you would write M-O-R-A-M. This is a space here, and that's just a Latin thing, moram and autum. So A-U-T-E, but auta is not a word. in Latin, you have to have another letter on the end for your endings. So this line here is called a macron. And macrons often symbolize N's or M's at the ends of words. So this word is actually autem, A-U-T-E-M, and the M is abbreviated. So we'll go quickly through this last word here, and then I'll set you free for a couple lines. So this letter here also looks pretty familiar. This is an F. The F has an ascending part and a descending part. So keep that in mind. Our modern Fs only ascend, and this F does all three. This is another A. It's getting a little more slided to the slouchy. It's a little more relaxed over here. And then this is a regular looking C. Here's an I, no dot on top. This little smudge here is not a dot. And the way this I is made, if you go back over to the calligraphy, you can see the top and the bottom have little hooks on them, and that's just the way the pen would have, they would have made those little ends with the pen. It's a part of the style of the letter, and that's one minim is that I. Then we have another recognizable E, another N. Here's that T again, and here's our last E, faciente. So now that we have our first line, I'm gonna go ahead and let you guys try to transcribe a couple more, and then we'll go through them together. Go ahead and try to do 2, 3, and 4 and see how far we get with those. And I'll give you about 2-3 minutes, and then we'll go back. Oh, I also forgot to mention, if you are skipping letters or words, go ahead and draw a line where those would be to keep those spaces open. That way you can tell that, for example, that first word, M-O, say you didn't know what the A was, M-O-R, line, M, and you know that you need to go back and fill that space. Okay, we got about 30 seconds left, and we're going to go over those first 4 lines together. Okay, I think we should go ahead and review what we've got because we have another document that we need to look at after this one. So, all right, so we went over the first line here. How did you guys feel about that second line? I may have set you up a little bit in that first word because I was curious how you would respond to this first word here. This is not what you might think it is. So this first letter here, it looks a little bit maybe like this F up here, except there's differences, and these differences are really important. You wouldn't make an F without a cross here. This letter seems to have that ascender just like the F, but there's no descender. This F down here goes below the line, and this letter does not. There's also no very obvious cross here. So this is not an F. What else could it be? You might have guessed it already if you're familiar with this, and I did introduce you very briefly to this in my introduction. This is an S. So this is a perfect example of the long S. It can start a word, it can go inside of a word. Here's another one. It doesn't matter the placement, they can use long S's wherever they feel like it. And so this is an example of a Carolingian long S. And then these in a row look pretty standard, a P-O-N. Here's another S, O, and then we have a dot. Punctuation at this time is very, very sporadic. Dots might mean a pause, not necessarily a stop. A lot of things come from the idea that you will be speaking them aloud, and so they marked for pauses, not stops. So there are pause marks, there are some punctuation, but this could be considered sort of like an old or like a Middle English period. Okay, so here we have a D, O, R. R is connected on both sides here. This R is a little bit different actually than the one up here, and I'll tell you why. It's starting to stretch a little bit. They're very, very similar, but I'm seeing the structure of this, not really the way we make R's now, but the way R's used to look. We'll see some different R's in a minute, and you'll see how they're using the same stroke, but it ends up with a different shape. So this is an M, these three in a row, these three minims. I, T, A, here's that one chambered A. Here's the U again. And it's good to go back up and see, oh yeah, this U has this little tag on the top. You can see how it goes in, up, and then down. That's a U, E-R, U-N-T. Oh, there's a hand now. Okay. So this is another O, M, N, E, S. Here's that long S again. E, T, D, O, R, M, I, E, R, U, N, T. How's everybody doing? Peter, how are you doing? All right, our last line in this document, this is that M that we just saw up here. We've started a new thought, M-E-D. And see, this is where it can get a little confusing. See how this is a D, one stroke down, this big chamber. You might say, yeah, it's obviously a D. Maybe not. Look up here. This D is made slightly differently. See how it's thin on the sides here? This point and this point. Up here, this is much thicker here. This is a stronger, it looks like a stronger, this is definitely a D. If you look a little closer at this, you might confuse this for a C and an L. And my point is driven home here in this next line. This is a C and an L, not a D. And so it can get a little messy whenever they don't quite close some of their letters. And this could have been M-E-C-L-I-A, but it is not. That's not a word. Media is a word. So that's D-I-A. And then we have autumn, A-U-T-E-M, and nocte, N-O-C-T-E. Okay. Take a deep breath. You have officially transcribed your first medieval document. Good job. I hope everybody's feeling good. All right, so now we're going to move on to the second document for this session.
Could you go back to that one?
Oh yeah, sure. Which one?
Line, oh, it's small now. Whoa. Line 5.
Yes.
Is that the dot E dot?
Dot E dot.
Yeah, right where
yes. So that is a very, that is an abbreviation. So the transcription would just be dot E dot with a macron on top of it. If you, what's the word? Expand the abbreviation, it's actually abbreviated EST, est. But E with a macron on top of it is an abbreviation for EST. Okay.
There was one other question from the chat.
Yeah, one other question from the chat.
Why do they abbreviate autumn in line 1 but not in line 4?
Okay, good question. So I'll zoom in and mention this real quick because we're doing pretty good on time. This is an excellent question. Someone asked, why is this AUTE macron autumn abbreviated and this one AUTEM not abbreviated? Guess what? No reason. The scribe just decided they were going to write it one way and then the other. This is something that's extremely typical. You're going to see words expanded and abbreviated close together, just like in this example. It's a really great note, and I'm glad that you noticed that, because that is a very common frustration. Once you learn a certain abbreviation, you're like, why isn't it all written that way? It's not, and that's just a preference from the scribe. Good.
Yeah. Someone said maybe aesthetic purposes to make the lines flow better.
It is very possible that they were afraid space-wise. They wanted these 3 lines to end up in the same place, but then this is short and they couldn't make it any longer. So it could be a layout issue. They wanted to make sure this word ended and didn't stick out too much. So the scribes are masters of space and time. They would have known exactly how long it took to do everything and how big everything would be. So they definitely would have planned out a lot before this ever hit the page. And a quick note on that, you can see these lines here underneath all of these written words. Those are pressed into the parchment before it's written, and they're essentially like medieval notebook lines. It's so they keep everything lined up and in a beautiful, pleasing way as they write everything down and keep everything in order. Okay, here's our second example. Okay, so now that you guys are pros, we're gonna get into something a little bit harder from close to the same time period. So this document is a Visigoth minuscule. It's very similar to this calligraphy sheet that I'm sharing as well, called Insular minuscule. It's from the 900s. This document is Spanish, and or early Spain, before Spain was united, so the Iberian Peninsula, and it is a liturgical text. So a little note about design here. You can see this this angel up here. This is the angel Gabriel, and this is an anthropomorphic initial. He is a decoration, but he is also taking the place of a letter. We see these now in modern books as dropped capitals, but the medieval manuscripts were very, very well-versed in these very beautiful initials. And this one is both an angel and a letter, and he's pointing into where he's starting the page. Okay, so we're gonna go over these first few lines, but I decided that this top part gets a little messy, so we're gonna start a little farther down. We're going to start on line 5. So I'm going to scroll down and zoom in a little bit more so we can focus directly on these lines. Okay, so I'm hoping that you see a little bit of difference here between that Caroline minuscule that we just saw and this insular Visigoth minuscule that we're looking at now. We're in a different place in Europe. This is a totally different different style of writing. It's very straight, it's more compact, it's a little more pointy. These are it sounds kind of funny to describe script overall this way, but paleographers do sort of, they do describe scripts as like, what general idea about the script can I describe it as? And one of the very defining features of this insular minuscule are these big tabs on top. And you can see this in the calligraphy. You can see these big, they look like flags almost, that they would put in front of all of these letters. And it's a big, thick way to start your letter. And this line here on the calligraphy, you can see the minims. This is how you would write each minim in those big, thick ways. All right, so as we go back to our first word here, this is an I and this is an N. So that's our first word, in. So here's a C, and now we have a lowercase I. And here we come across something I didn't talk about because it is pretty complicated, but for now it's very, I'll make it very simple for you. U's and V's are interchangeable. So this appears to look like a U, C-I-V or C-I-U. They can be the same thing. And depending on where they are in the word is how you pronounce them. So the next letter is an I. So now we have I-N-C-I-U or V-I. And I keep saying V, it looks like a U, but in this word, siwi, it actually would have been transcribed as a V. So it gets really complicated depending on what the word is. But I said before we started, you transcribe what you see. So if you see a U, you write down U. So after that, you have an I. And then here is where this scribe does something that is pretty unique and tripped me up the first time I looked at this. This letter here, it looks kind of like an A with this big, long platform off the back. And it's really hard to really understand what's going on here. And this is where in paleography, you look through the rest of the text and you find other examples. Just finding where that character shows up again, maybe a little clearer, maybe in a shorter word you can figure out. But in the interest of time, I'm going to give you the key to this. This is a T. I know, when I found out that this scribe wrote his T's this way, I was just like, why? Why do this like this? But this is what they look like. So in this specific document, this is what a T looks like. This whole around and down, this entire chamber, and then this part, this is all a T. Okay, so you're not out of the woods yet. This is the next one. So this swoop and these go together. They kind of look like a modern U, yes? Would you say that? It kind of looks like a modern U. Again, we are fooled by our modern brain who wants a U. This scribe does not connect the top of their A's. So this is an A. All right, we will show you another place where this is happening so you don't get quite so frustrated. This is a very open A. If we go down a line, this is also an A. This is a little more closed. So you can see this one might be a little more sloppy than this one, but these are both A's. And you can tell that is it over here in the? No, so my minuscule calligraphy doesn't show A's that way. And that is because every scribe is gonna do things a little bit differently. So this A is open, this A is more closed, but there's still a little bit of a gap here. And then I'll show you another A down here. This is another one. So you can start to see If this one tripped you up, I would have just skipped it. And then down here, you think, oh, this is not a U. This doesn't look like a U. What could this be? And you start to connect your dots. Oh, this might be an A. And if this one is an A, maybe this was also an A. So then we have, after the A, we have this same symbol again. This is that other T. This, I know it looks like a little lowercase a, but this is that T that he made before. And then finally, we're finishing it up with an M over here. So down to the next line, we have this descender. This is a G. And now we know that these are A's, this open chamber, A. Okay, so at first look, this is an ascending letter. So it could be an L, it could be a B. We have to decide, do we feel like this is an L or does this connect? Is this a B? Is this an open chambered B? Well, how many words do you know gably? If this is a Latin text about Christian prayer, if you know more about your context, what about Galilee? So L-I-L. This also gives us a clue. This isn't a B because B and L's, so this gives us a clue because this L and this L look very similar. They made them the exact same way. If we had time to go through the whole thing, we could find what the B's look like, and they probably don't look like this. So then that would confirm for us that this is not how the scribe would make a B, thus making this L-I-L-E-E. So these E's look like little backwards 3s. They do look like our uppercase cursive E that you learned many years ago, I'm sure, and I remember. This scribe decided to do a little flourish and cross them both and flourish up, but these are 2 E's. Okay, so one last word and then we'll set you off on your own for a couple minutes. This is a C. You can breathe easy. C-U-I. Hopefully that makes you feel a little bit better. Some of these are pretty challenging. All right, so if you guys want to go ahead and try to tackle 7, 8, and 9. 8's a doozy, get ready. 7, 8, and 9. I'll give you about 3 minutes to work on those and then we will reconvene for the last couple minutes of class.
In Suvitatum, I think we might have missed a letter. T-E-M, the end of 45.
Okay.
And then,
oh yes, I do see that, thank you. Sorry to interrupt. The first letter, the first word here, civitatum, this T, this ascender is an E. Yes, you're absolutely right. So we can confirm that with this Galilee. This E here is the same E up here. And it is a little different the way he made it, but yes, it's T-E-M. Thank you. All right, go ahead. Okay, that is our 3-minute mark. So now we're gonna look together at these next 3 lines. All right, so our first, on line 7, we have, this is an N. It's an interesting N too, that they make this big mark up here before we go down into these little, these tails underneath. So it's sort of like a twirl around before we go into the second part of the N. And they do the same thing with the M's, which is kind of interesting. So N-O-M, got little, these are called feet, or a lot of people call these feet on the bottom of these letters, and we'll see them in all of the sessions. They're really common. So N-O-M, and now we have that letter which we saw up here and up here in civitatum. This is an E. It's that ascending backwards looking E. I guess a backwards 3, I called it. And then another N with its little feet. And then we have another N, and then we have this open A, which we did talk about a little. It can get really close. You can see this U here, but I want to point out that the U has this straight line. The U is part of those minims we talked about. It's a straight down and across. A is a curve. It's a curved chamber. And so the pen would be doing a different, would be going in a different direction, and the U and the A should have the different characteristics with a pen. Okay, so now we're gonna get to the line 8 and see how you guys did. This is pretty wonky. This is a Z. It does look like a cursive Z, perhaps, if you remember a lowercase cursive Z, but Z's are always really fun in medieval manuscripts. They can be all kinds of interesting shapes. This is another one of those open chambered A's. And then we have an R. We didn't see any R's otherwise. This R is starting here and then going straight down and then back up and across. So once we know this is an R, we can see an R here. We can see an R here, I think. Oh no, that's not an R. Okay, so we'll know as we go. So this one is an R, and there's another letter coming up that looks very much like it. So I got tripped up for a second. Okay, so that's an R. This is that ascending E, and here is a T. This is a bit of a lazy T. We can see that it has the same shape as this up here, this short T with the, oh, sorry, this is an E. Shoot, how is that a T? Let's look. How did they make that a T? It's a good question. I don't understand that one, but that's okay. That's the beauty of paleography. Not everything is gonna make total sense. So here is a punctuation mark. It's sometimes referred to as the upside down semicolon, and it is to designate a pause in the writing. So here we have an A, here is a D. This is sort of a curved D in the ascender, and then another U, U, I, R, same R as over here. Now we have this G, it's open on the top, same as this G, got this long descender, I, N, E with our ascending E here, and M. Okay, last line. This is a different D. So we just saw this D, we got comfortable with this D, we're like, okay, this is how the D looks. Just kidding, here's another one in a totally different style. This one looks more like the style of the rest of the writing. It has this big wedge on top, it's very straight, it's very thin. This doesn't match as well, and that's because this D is a carryover from a different type of handwriting. The scribe may have been using things that they had learned in different times, so this is actually a crossover from an earlier script. So this is a D, I, and here's where I got tripped up. This is another one of those long S's. So I can tell you now, looking back, how I can tell it's an S, because it has this hook on top. These R's don't hook. They go up and down. The S's hook up to the top. You see that difference? The R would go up and then swoop down, S's are a hook. So yes, it becomes very minute because we aren't familiar with the language. There's a P, O, N. There's another S, A, open chambered A. Here's that T again, A, M. And then we have another punctuation mark, not necessarily a period, U, I, R, O. So these are the examples we're going to look at in session 2. So if you have paper copies of the session 2 documents, please go ahead and get those out and put those next to your notebook paper. And you can also go ahead and number your notebook lines 1 to 15. And now I'm going to switch over to an image viewer so we can look at these a little bit closer. Okay, so you can see first of all, I chose this image. It's really beautiful. I got it from one of my medieval manuscript books that has some really lovely color images. This one is Italian Gothic rotunda. It's a very round form of Gothic. It was written in 1408, so it's a little bit later, actually a lot later than our first session, and this is Italian. It is part of a religious text called the Little Hours of the Virgin Mary. Okay, so as we go in to this document, you can see that I already numbered the lines and I blacked out the side we're not going to look at. And that's because I didn't want you to get confused on which column we were looking at. So I'm going to zoom in even further so we can really get a good look at these first 10 lines. Okay. All right, so right off the bat, we're going to talk a little bit about this guy here. This is a historiated initial. It has the apostles inside of it, and it is a great decoration that is very, very common in the 15th century. It has some gold here. It's very beautiful. This was a very typical way that these beautiful books were decorated. It also is a letter. It's really hard to see what this letter is, and I'm going to tell you because there's no way you would be able to guess it. This is an S. I didn't even see it for a little bit. I was like, how is this an S? And I'm going to trace it for you. It goes up here, and then you can see the swing in pink here and the swing in pink here. This S. It's rough. It's pretty hard to see. It's assuming you really know your letters well to guess that that was an S. So moving on from the S, our first word here, this is also a decorated initial. It's just done with the pen, excuse me, and done with the pen instead of all of these pigments. And this is a C. So I'm not gonna try to make you guess what this C is either. So that's just part of this word and it's decorated, and we're not gonna go into decorated initials. All right, so when we're looking at Gothic words, there's, oh, I have my other document I was gonna pull up. So this is an example of a Gothic style that isn't exactly like the style we're looking at on the right, but it is similar. So Gothic textura is a family of scripts. They're all very similar, but they have a lot of unique attributes that make them unique. I'm sorry, they make them very distinct in their types of design. So the one we're looking at on the right, this is rotunda, which means it's very round, very open. And the one on the left is more pointy. This is precisa or precisus. But the same concept of Gothic textura is there. You can see that the image on the left is not an alphabet per se, it is a calligraphy sheet. So it shows you how the pen would move in order to create these shapes. So if the pen goes straight down, it creates a thick line. And if the pen goes diagonally, it creates a thin line. And so that is how the scribe over here is creating these thin diagonal lines, like on this Q, you can see the thin line and the thick down line. And actually my pointer is a little fountain pen, so it kind of looks like what the pen would look like. That's kind of fun. All right, so we're gonna look at the first 3 lines, and then I'm gonna let you guys do the next few in a few minutes. So the first one, after we get these crazy fancy initials out of the way, we have an I here. This is just a 1 minim I. And then we have 3 more minims, and then 2 more minims. And now you can see, if I didn't tell you this was an I, can you also see how that could have been an N? Or this could have been an M, and then an I. See how these can start to get really, your brain sort of sees in and out, M's and N's and I's and U's. So it really helps to know your endings. There's not gonna be a lot of endings that end in NS like this, but US, very, very common. So knowing a little bit of Latin in this case is useful. So as we go through, I'm not gonna make you guess too much in these first ones so we can get used to everything, but this is an I, this is an M, so 1, 2, 3 minims in the M, and then we have a U, and then this is that short S, that sigma S I called it. It looks a lot like our modern S does, and it's one of my favorite letters in calligraphy. I really enjoy making these S's. So our next line is Q. You would start here, and then you would go down, whoops. You would go down and make that Q. And this is a descender, which means it goes off the main line down into the descender part of the text. And now here we have something that is definitely confusing to a new eye. And that would be these 3 minims and this line on top. So this is called a macron, and this is a abbreviation. So maybe you thought this was QUI, maybe a QUI, but in fact, this is QM with an abbreviation on top. The abbreviation is actually condensing a lot of letters. It's quoniam, which is the whole word quoniam, QUONIAM. But the scribe has taken all of the letters out of the middle and put in a macron on top, thus completely condensing this word into QM. And now you see how complicated abbreviated Latin can get. Okay, so the next word here, this might look like an O, but this is where your observation skills of the entire document come in. Maybe if this is an O, find another one. This one also looks that way, but then what is this? So it's really important to look very closely at all these little details of the scribe's letters. If this O is made this way with a big long tail off the front and the same big long tail off the front, then why is this O made totally circular? So maybe they are variations of O's, it's possible, but it's also possible that this is not an O at all, that this might be the O and this might be something else. And in fact, this is not an O, this is a D. So this long tail is, I don't know if you guys can see my hands, but normally a D's staff is straight up and down. This D's staff has started to curl over the top. So it's, oh, am I going the wrong way? Sorry. It's going over the chamber of this D here. So this is a sort of like a lazy D, but this is the way this scribe is making the D's. And they are definitely different than these O's down here. And now that you see that these are different letters, you can see that there is the slight variations. So that's D, and here's an I by itself, no dots. L, ascending up here above, I, and now we have a G. So I'm not sure whether or not this looks like a G to you. It might. It has this regular chamber that we're used to in a G, and then it has a descender underneath. But then this scribe connects the G here, sort of like when we make a G and we curl it across. You can look here on the calligraphy side, this word Gothic, the G comes up again with this last stroke to connect the end. So it almost looks like a strange 8, the way there's 2 chambers to this G. And then we have another E and another abbreviation. This one is just the abbreviation for N. So this word ends with the word N, and instead of putting it on there, they just put a little macron on top. All right, we are gonna go through this last line, and then you guys can do the next 3 on your own. So this one here, this is a little bit tricky because this looks like a very short version of what we might think of as a T. This is a T. It has a cross here. So it is made the same way we would make a T. It just doesn't have this ascender that we're used to whenever we make a T. So the T's here are short. This is an I. So the T's crossbar goes into the I. And you can see how the calligrapher's pen would do this stroke and then draw across the T. And instead of lifting the pen, it just went straight into the I. And those are 2 different letters, but he just connected everything. Okay, and now we have this big ascender here, big open chamber. This is a B made with 1 stroke all the way around. And then we have this. What is this? This is a little curl. It is a Latin abbreviation as well. This is not a letter. You would not know this. This is just a curl. And that is the abbreviation for US. So tibus is the Latin word. So next word here. This might be a familiar one now. You can see this shape of the D. Here we go again. This is the D shape. But this one's doing something a little bit more unique. This one is connected to the E. This is a technique called biting, where the letters are kind of squished together. D, E, squished together. And we'll see it biting down here too. This B and O, bonus, this is biting. So D, E, this is a U. We have these 2 minims, and then M, deum. Okay, so that's probably enough of me talking for a minute. I'm sure you're anxious to get going. If you want to do lines 4, 5, and 6, and then we'll meet up again in 3 minutes, and we'll talk about what those lines say. I'll be right back. If you get real ambitious, you can do the 7th line too, just for fun. If you get, I see a couple letter forms in there that we won't cover otherwise. So you can go into 7 if you like.
Question, does it ever help if you can't figure out a word? Just Google what you think it is.
Yes, Google is your friend. This is a good question. Somebody asked, does it help to Google if you don't know what the word is? Totally. If you think that it might be a word, like if you weren't for sure what deum was, yeah, Google it. See if you can find a prayer that's spelled that way. And a lot of these prayers are typed up and digitized, so you would be able to find your answers that way too. It's a little less fun that way, but if you're doing this for a project and you need the speed on your side, definitely you can use the internet to figure out those letters. Okay, well, we got 10 more seconds and then we'll get going. Okay, so we're gonna start with 4 here. This one may have tripped you up a little bit. If you know a little bit of Latin, this word pops out because it gets used a lot. This is omnia, O-M, 3 minims for M, 2 minims for N, 1 minim for I, omnia. And then this is an A. This is an example of a 1-chambered A. Actually, this is almost a 2-chambered A, the way this hook comes around. I explained this in the first session. This is like a typed A, the way that we type it, but not the way we write it anymore. This chamber on the bottom and this hook on top. So that's omnia. And then this is C and O. This is the beginning of a new word on the next line. Just because it ends here doesn't mean that's the end of the word. They would split it wherever they needed to in order to fill the space. So this is C and O. And then we have O, P, E. The P has the descender down here. E, this is biting between the P and the E. R, A. N, T, U, R. You guys are lucky with these R's. Sometimes the R's get real wild. I, N. But you can see how this could be U-I if you just sort of look at it that way, but that's not a word. I-N is a word. B, biting with O, B-O-N, U, and then what is happening? This is 2 different things. This here is an abbreviation for M. Yes, it takes about the same amount of space to make, Peter made a face. It takes the same amount of space to put this abbreviation as an M, but yet this is what they have chosen to do. It's very close to the edge here in terms of this, keeping it all in line. So I think they just didn't want a big 3-minimed M to stick out the back. And then we have this colon-shaped thing, which is a punctuation mark. Okay, we'll do one more line and then we're gonna move on. So here we have something a little bit newer and the forms are the same, just we haven't seen the shape before. This is an H, has a very straight shaft line, but then we have this hook around. This H almost closes at the bottom, but since we know that B's are made in 1 stroke like this can't be a B. This isn't the way the scribe makes the B's. So we can use context clues to point out that the B's are made this way, the H's are made with this 2nd stroke. And then we have another I, and then this sigma S, which is my favorite. And then we have a Q. And then you might have thought this was a Q and another M, like we saw up here. But guess what? Q and M are not a word by themselves. And this up here has an abbreviation mark, meaning this is an abbreviated word. This is not an abbreviated word. This is Q-U-I. This is qui, even though it looks very similar to the Q and the M. And then our last word here is this long S. So I know he just made a sigma S, I know. But here we go again, deciding to trip us all up, and he made a long S here. The long S's sometimes go through the ascender, the middle, and the descending part, but sometimes it just looks like a modern looking F. If we had time to go through, we could find what F's look like, and I guarantee you they don't look like this. This is not the way that, oh, I think here's one down here, yes. No, maybe I shouldn't go off, otherwise we won't get done. Okay, so just for in the interest of time, we're not going to go looking for an F, but Oh yes, okay, thank you. On the calligraphy side, you can see an F has a big cross on it, and the top flares up. This is how an F would be made, and a long S has this wedge out the side. So it, to a first glance, might look like an F, but if you find examples of Fs everywhere, all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's not a lot of Fs in Latin, but there's a lot of S's. That's probably what this is. So we have E, C, U with an abbreviation, which is omitted an N, which unless you know the word, you wouldn't know that. So you would just mark U with an abbreviation. And then we have this D again with the very low hanging ascender, U, M. And then finally, this last letter here is a P, but this is one of the ones I showed you in my presentation. This is a P with a little abbreviation mark, and this is the abbreviation for pro. And that would be a very standard one they would use many different times, just by itself, P with this cross through it. Okay, before we move on, is there any questions about that one in particular? Accent. Oh, yeah, they look like there are some sort of accent marks around the eyes, maybe like a proto dot. Don't get married to those. Those are dangerous. Sometimes they'll be there, sometimes they won't. They could have other purposes, but I wouldn't lean too hard on those as part of the letter. You can definitely note that they're there, but I wouldn't put those in my transcription as part of the letter. Okay, we are going to move on to our second document. And we'll pull those letters back up again. Okay, our second document, let me switch up my documents. Our second document is also a Gothic quadrata, a Gothic bookhand, or sorry, it's not a Gothic, it is not a rotunda like we saw the big round wide writing. This one is a Gothic quadrata, which is a different style of Gothic bookhand. It is also different than this calligraphy over here, but the calligraphy is in the same family. I just wanted you guys to see the similarities with these different Gothic bookhands. So we're going to zoom in a little on this document and take a look at some of these letters. So there are definitely going to be some similarities here on what you see and what we saw in the last one. But this one is a different style, and it does have something called feet. And I'm gonna pull from this word here, anima. These dots on the bottoms of all these minims, these are diamond-shaped feet, and they're very, very typical of this Gothic style. It's something that differs with this calligraphy over here. This style doesn't use those diamond feet near as often. So we're gonna go ahead and look at the first two lines, and then I'm gonna let you guys try to muster up through this one. This one's a little bit harder. So this is a big uppercase I here, it's decoration, and this is an N. We have these two minims barely connected, and that's an N. So now we have something that looks similar to the other A's. This is an A as well. This is a more square chambered A. This type of writing is definitely less rounded, much more square, still wide, very wide, but much more square. So you can see the scribe would have gone down and then around. And now we have a little more upstanding D. We still have this relaxed ascender here, but the D is still shaped in basically one pen movement. And then we have a U, two minims, and then an E. This E diagonal is very fine, very hard to see, but that's how they would make an E. And then we have an N. So yes, look from the U to the N and tell me how they're different. That is a great question. This is a tough one. These minims look really similar. And then here, this is almost imperceptible. Do you see this diagonal line and then cross through? This is a T. This has that same minim stroke, but the way they cross the top is very unique to a T. And then we have a U on the end. Duentu. All right, next word is D with this relaxed ascender. And then an N. And my eye keeps thinking it's a U, but it's an N. And you know how I know that is practice. DNI is all very common abbreviation for Domini or Dominica or Dominum, lots of Domini abbreviation. So this is DNI with an abbreviation macron on top. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is Domini. And then the next one is very similar. D, and then N, this N, I, and now we're gonna trip you up. This is a C. This one's hard. So the T's and the C's are extremely similar. And this is something I struggle with a lot. It is very hard to see T's and C's differently. They make them almost exactly the same. There's sometimes a tiny bit of a tail on the top, a tiny bit of an ascender from the T that the C doesn't have, but they are very close. So this is D, N-I-C-A. And this macron on top tells us there's something missing in the middle, O-M-I. So it's actually Dominica, but it just, but the abbreviation shortens it up. So I think in the interest of time, I'm going to let you guys free on 2, 3, 4, and 5 for 3 minutes. So you want to do 2 through 5. They can be, this is pretty tough. I know this is going to be harder, but I want to give you some time to try it out and see what you come up with. So we'll do 3 minutes and then we'll reconvene. Okay, we have about 30 more seconds. Okay, that is our timer. We're gonna go ahead and look at the lines. We'll start with number 2. Okay, so this first one here is a P. You can see that the sender down, and then the strike over actually goes through the P, and that is a very typical looking Gothic P. And there's an abbreviation above that. So that means this P is hiding something, and we'll find out when we transcribe the rest of this. Okay, so how many minims do we have? 1, 2, 3. What could be in there? I-N, M, U-I, so many possibilities. This one is actually just an M. This is straight up M. And then this last letter is an A with this very skinny horizontal closure of this chamber. This abbreviation is hiding an R. So this is actually prima here. This next word is A-D. This one's a little more straight up. We're a little more vertical with this D. And then primus, P-M-A-S. A lovely S here, and this abbreviation. And then this is a tough one. Here is a V. This V is made differently than the U, and I know it's endlessly confusing, but this is a V, and this is an S with 2 dots. This is an extreme abbreviation for Vesperos. How would you know? But if you were transcribing, you would just write VS and then write these 2 dots on top, so you know that there's an abbreviation. So the last part of this line, even crazier with our abbreviations, this is a capital C. This looks kind of like a C with another line through it, and I would advise you to sort of study some typical uppercase and lowercase Gothic letters before you dig into something like this, because I now have seen so many capital Gothic letters that I can tell that this is a C, but it might not look anything like a traditional C in our opinion, so, or in our modern eyes. So that definitely helps to know what those C's could look like in uppercase letters. And then this is another A, and then we have a little bitty M on top and this little dot over here. And this is a strange abbreviation. This word is actually capitulum, but all we see are C-A-M. So the next line here, this is where your context and your history knowledge helps. This red up here is its own phrasing. The next part starts in the black ink with this historiated initial. So I'm sorry, this decorated initial. So this is a D, and this D goes with this black line. It does not have anything to do with this red line up here, which is where this I comes from. So this is a D, and then this is a big uppercase E. It swings around, excuse me, it swings around like the C shape, and then it has a cross in it. And just like we saw in the other example, this cross goes straight into a U. They made this crossbar and then went right down into the first minim for this U, and then another S. This is Deus, and this is a P and an A. And then we have down here C, because this line here is the top of the C. It goes down, across and then down. And then another minim I, C-I-S. And then immediately from sigma S, we go to long S. I know. So this is a long S with this hook on top and this little wedge out the side. It's not a cross, it's not an F. And the more you get used to them, the more you'll see. And this is a great example. Here's an F, this cross, very heavy cross, totally different in terms of pen strokes. So this is an A, I'm sorry, this is an S, A, N, 2 minims, N, C with this heavy cross up here, C, T, I, sancti. And then our last line, did I ask you guys to do 5? 5 lines. The 5th line is F with a big cross going straight into an I, no dots. Here we go into a C. And you can see how the C curves a tiny bit. The longer you look at these letters, the more you start to see how close some of these C's look to each other. I think the C's are probably the hardest for me to pick out because they look so similar to I's and to T's. And then this is an issue of preservation. This ink is coming off here, worn away, so it'd be harder to see, but this is an E and a T, so this is fiquet. And then our last word, this is another V, and it is made differently than a U. I'll show you up here real quick. This U that we looked at, this U has a tail, so it goes down, over, down, over. So this U is two minims with this tail, this diamond foot. This V doesn't have any of that. And this V up here in the Vesperas also doesn't have a tail. It's a different way to make this letter. V-O-S. So that is, that's line 5. So we are just at time now. So I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna ask first if anybody has any questions about this specific image, and then I will exit out of my screen share and we can talk a little bit for the next 5 minutes. Are there any chat questions?
Is this document also Italian?
This one, no, this is Spanish. This is from the Iberian Peninsula in the 900s, so quite a bit older. This is almost 500 years older than the we looked at first, but this one is harder, so I decided to use the rotunda first as to get your eye in a little better. And this one is pretty challenging. Oh, and I wanted to point out this fun letter on the bottom. This is an X. It looks like this big cross here, and then this crossbar in the middle. What? Oh yeah, I can zoom in. Yeah, I really like the this X here. This XPI with a cross on top is Latin for Jesus Christ. Okay, so I am going to exit out of here.
Is the first word on line 3?
This one?
Yeah, they're asking if it's DGUS, but
it's DE. So here, this is a habit of this big first letter, but then also the E is a capital E. And I see what you're seeing here is like seeing this as a G, but this minim belongs to the U. This minim is part of the U. This cross is part of the E, but they're written with one pen stroke. So it goes from E to U. So there's the difference. And they made a capital E instead of a lowercase e. So I don't know. Sometimes they just do what they think is that they like, they have a certain style that they like. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my document viewer. So then we can zoom in closely and take a look at these two documents. All right, so if you have paper copies of these documents, I recommend getting those out now and setting yourself up. I'm going to situate myself here. So I've numbered these for you. Go ahead and have your document on one side and your notebook paper on the other, and make a numbered list on the side of, number your lines 1 through 13. Looks like I cut it off at 13. We're not going to go through all of these lines because this is a challenging script. But this document here is from the Canterbury Tales. It is, let me see. So this is a copy of the Ellesmere Chaucer, which is currently housed at the Huntington Library. It is from around 1400, written in England. And this is an Anglicana style of writing. It's very beautiful. It's one of my favorites. It's kind of spiky and more compact. This is something that paleographers do when they first look at a text. They sort of get an overall idea of the general impressions they get from looking at a script. So this is written in English, and Chaucer is generally acknowledged as the beginning of modern English, the end of Middle English. But that doesn't mean any of this is really going to make much sense. We are going to start a little farther down. First of all, I want to point out this, this document over here on the left. This is not necessarily in ABCs. This is more to show you on a clear, large background what these letters could look like, and the sort of in the style that they're made. This is a calligraphy book that I got this from, and it shows you how the pen strokes go and what order they go, and how the pen straight down makes a thick line and diagonal makes a thin line, and that's how the scribe would create these images or these letters. So right on the top, we are given a proto header for this tale, and we're in the Canterbury Tale, so these are all named after people, and this is the Knight's Tale, and I will break apart these letters for you. So this scribe has a lot of flair. You can see lots of panache. The top letters all have these really high ascenders, and it's just a style. It's just for fun to make it pretty. And the same with this header. So this big tall ascender here is just for style. And this is actually a K. So the K is an ascender all the way up. This is another clue that we are no longer in Latin, that we have Ks, and also we have Ys. Now we're in English, and English is kind of a mess. So we have a K here, and the K has some of what we might consider part of a modern K with the tall ascender, but the way we make that bottom stroke of a K, this is not the bottom stroke of this K. This is the foot of this first ascender. The bottom stroke of this K is actually the center stroke here. So they would make a K that splits off the top and then crosses through the middle like a T. So that's a K. This is an N. Do I need to zoom in a little more maybe? Okay, this one's a little harder to see. I'm sorry for the quality. I just love this script style, so I wanted us to look at it. So this is a K, N, and this is a Y. You can see this descender here with a dot. The Y has a whole other historical context on where the Y comes from in Middle and Old English. We're not going to go into it. It is really interesting though, and I'd love to talk about it with you if you're interested later. But for now, this is just a Y with a dot on top. And now we have a G. And if you were in the last session, it's similar to that G. It's two chambers here. So it sort of looks like a figure 8. And if we look over here on the paleography, on the calligraphy side, you can see these chambers and how it was connected with this diagonal. And this scribe did the same thing and made this top chamber, bottom chamber, and connected it with this diagonal. Now we have a very fancy H. The H goes way up into the ascenders, and then also the H goes down into the descenders. And then finally, we have a short little modest T here, and this is just a little flourish at the end. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but this symbol is a proto-paragraph symbol. So in Microsoft Word, if you turn on your like your editing, you can see this like backwards P shape with 2 lines, and that's a paragraph symbol. The medieval manuscripts oftentimes used some sort of paragraph symbol, which is kind of funny that now we use it in a modern way. Okay, so in the interest of having any idea what these words actually are, even if you can transcribe them, we're gonna skip these first few rows because these words are not, they don't even really look like words that we would be familiar with. So we're gonna skip down to number 9. And this is where we're gonna start our transcription. So if you wanna go ahead and label your page down to number 9, we're gonna get real close to this one. I'm able to zoom in. There we go. Okay. All right, so this, this line, number 9, starts with this letter, this interesting letter, which could be a lot of things, but I'm here to tell you that that is a B. This 2-lobed B here, and this is just a decoration off the back end of B. Keep in mind, this is a very flourishy scribe. So this is a uppercase B. He capitalizes the beginning of every line here because this is essentially poetry in terms of stanzas. And so all of these are capitalized. So this is a B, and then we have an O. This O is modern. It doesn't have these 4 like separate sections of the Gothic we had before. Now this O is 2 strokes, first stroke, second stroke. Very graceful looking. And now we have a T here. These people from the second session might remember the T's before didn't have that ascender. Now it's growing up out of the top. So this is a more modern T, much more familiar to what we see now, what we make now. So this is what the T's look like with a little bit of a sprouting top on them. And then this pen goes directly into this letter. This is an H. So this H has a very hooked ascender reaching way over the top and goes down into this staff. And then the second half of the H goes down into the descender, curling way around. So it's much more elaborate than our H's are now. And this last letter is an E. This is a little bit fine to see, but it's fairly modern looking in the shape of the E. This is the word both, B-O-T-H-E. Okay, next letter. We'll do this line, and then I'm gonna let you guys do the next few lines and be brave because it gets pretty hairy. Okay, so the next word here is O and then a big F. Remember, this is an F. This is how Fs look. Fs have an ascender on the top, they have a descender on the bottom, and they have this big cross stroke in the middle. This is how an F is made. And you're gonna see things that look kind of like Fs. They aren't Fs if they don't look like this. This is how this scribe makes Fs. So now we have another T, just like this T, and this H. These THs together, you can see how this, the scribe took the pen and brought it around. It's very fluid. Go straight into that next line. Same here. Go straight into the next line and curled around. Speed is your friend when you're writing books by hand. So this is very typical to connect as much as possible. So we have both of the, and now we have this very overhanging ascender. This is an L. There's a lot of overhanging ascenders here, and this L has a very elaborate one. And then we have an O, same O that we've seen here and here. And then we have a U. So there's a minim here and a minim here, like we talked about minims a little bit in my introduction. And this is, these two minims are connected. This is L-O-U. And now we have another E. These E's have a very strong cross stroke here and barely a tail at all, but they do have a little bit off the back. So E, and while we're thinking about E's, here's another E. And here comes what I've been warning people about. Here's this letter. This is an R. So this is the beginning of our headache with medieval R's. I think I've seen maybe 5 or 6 completely different structured R's, and you have to know what all of them look like, and there's no other context. This scribe makes big open looking R's. They're kind of a dagger shape, and I had a teacher who called them the dagger shaped R, like a V shape. It's very long, goes into the descender down here, very open. But then this edge here, it goes straight into the E, so it's very muted at the end. But this would have been a full-on V shape if it was like the end of a word. So L-O-U-E-R-E, lover. The U is representing a V here. And we didn't go into this much, but U's and V's are interchangeable for a very long time, even up to the 1700s. So that's a whole other issue that we're not gonna address at the moment, but U's and V's are interchangeable. So now moving down the list, we actually, I'm going to scoot over a little bit so we don't get lost. Here we go. So moving down the list here, this is an A. This is a 2-chambered A. So our typed A's today are sort of like a 1.5 chamber. We have this bottom chamber and then a hook on top. And that's usually how we type an A, but we don't write our A's that way. This A's hook goes all the way and closes. So now we have 2 chambers making an A. And this is an N. This minim connects here. And here is a D. So this D is a little challenging until you know what it looks like. It's a little pointy on the front, very jagged, and this tail, this ascender, just doesn't stop. It just keeps going and going. So once you know this really distinct D shape, you can find it other places, like just scanning without looking too deeply. Here's one, here's one. And they start to jump out at you the more you look at specific letters that look familiar. So now we have and. We're almost there. We're almost at the end of the sentence. TH, same TH as we've seen. Actually, this is the same word. This here and this are both THE. And here's our last word in the sentence. This is P. So this stroke goes down into the descender and this chamber crosses through. I know we don't usually make our modern P's this way, but this cross through the P is very common for these medieval letters. And then we have this big open V-shaped R. It does look similar to this lover R over here. If you go back to that R, see it again here, and then we go directly into an I. And now we hit this. This might immediately look to you as in modern eyes as an F. So if we call this an F and we move on, we'll come back to it and we'll see what it really is because it might not make sense. So here's an O. And then we have 2 minims. It looks like a U to me, but it's actually an N. And this is where your minims will fool you into thinking, oh, it looks connected at the bottom. But even if it is, it could still be an N, or it could still be something else. They definitely trip you up with this like false connections at the top and the bottom that might not be what you think they are. So there's 2 minims here. This is an N, E, rounded, much more rounded. And then we have this big R, again, fully formed dagger-shaped R with a flag on the back. So P-R-I-F-O-N-E-R. Prisoner? Close. What word do we know? There's no word in English named prisoner, but there is prisoner. And here is an example of a long S. So this, and like I pointed out with this F from our word of, the F has to have a cross on it. Even though the top in this instance, the F and the long S are made the same way on the top, and they both reach down into the descender, there's no cross here. So this cannot be an F, and it is an S in this instance. And this word is prisoner. Okay, so now I know this is, I know you're excited to do some on your own. So if you want to go ahead and tackle 10, 11, and 12, or as far as you get, it's totally fine. These are beginning of the end of Middle English and the beginning of Modern English words. So they're not going to look exactly right in terms of words. So do your best, and we'll give you about 3 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes, and then we will come back and talk about it. Okay, we got 30 seconds left. So finishing up whatever line you're on or whatever word you're on. Okay, we are going to take a look at what we got. This one's a challenge for sure.
Yeah.
Don't feel discouraged. This is a huge learning curve. This is beautiful writing, but it is tough. Okay, so I went through 9 with you, so we're gonna go through 10 and 11, and then we're gonna move on. So 10, we have, this is a capital I. Nothing to know really, except that eventually you learn some capital letters. Capital letters are a little more challenging in that they can look like lots of different things, and that's just something that you learn over time. The next word is N-O-O-T, newt. Okay, so here is where I think you might have tripped up a little, this is one of my favorite things about this script, is this letter here. So it has these 2 chambers. It kind of looks like an uppercase B, but then it has this big hanging thing off the front. What is this doing? I am here to tell you that this is a W. There's no way that you would have known this is a W unless you knew that Anglicana W's look like this, and now you know. And as I scroll up, just for a moment, here's a W, here's a W, here's a W. You start seeing these double-lobed letters, and the W is very distinctive for this. Yeah.
This is a really good example of how it's.
Oh, so yes, thank you. On the calligraphy page, you can see the evolution of the W and how it was created. So it literally is a double V or a double U, making 2 up and down motions and then curling off the front and the back. So it is very, very elaborate, and it turns into a lot of different things, but this is a W. Here we have an H, which is very curly underneath. H-I-C-H, this word is which. And here's another H, H-A, that double-lobed A, T-H, half. Here's the word the, T-H-E, which we have seen before. And we're back to that W. Here it is again, these 2-lobed W. O, F, U, and here's these 2 L's. L's have this big hook on the top. You can see where the scribe took the quill and went around, and then drew it up again and went around, not lifting the pen as fast as possible. E, and then a big wide R, woefuller. And then our last word on this line, 3 minims. This is an M. It doesn't look like an M to me either. It looks like I and a U, but there's some way this scribe has decided that this is the way they're making their M's. And here's another E. And then this long piece here is deceptive, this long letter, because it might look like an F again, because it has this cross here, but in actuality, this cross is part of the T. This is not part of the this letter. This is another long S. This top and bottom down into the descender, this is a long S, no cross, and then the T, the big cross across the middle of it, which is confusing. So then we have an E and then another R, mester. And then our last line, I think I'm only going to do half of this in the interest of time because I want you guys to dig into this next one. I picked this line specifically because I really like this word. This is an English word that we use now. It's just spelled oddly. Actually, it's spelled the same too. It's just written oddly. So something that medieval manuscripts did often, especially in this time period, is when they did a capital F, the capital F was just 2 small Fs. That's just the way a capital F was made. And so it's just two small F's with a big cross through the middle, and that's an uppercase F. So there's an O, and right when you thought you knew what an R looked like, here it comes. Here's a new R for you. It is a two-shaped R with a little, it's almost like another cursive. You know how some people make Z's like twos and then cross in the middle? It's almost like that. It's a trip for sure to see a totally different R and not even close to this R that we had just seen. So this is the word for, F-O-R. All right, we'll do two more words. So here is a sigma S. It's leaning quite a bit. So Peter, what did you think that one was?
It might be a W.
Okay, so he was thinking into the W world, but now that you know the W's have this chamber up here, this is not the same shape. Also, if you see something like this and you're like, what is that? Skip it. Go to the next letter. If this letter requires all of this to make an H, which this is an H, then you know this is all on its own. It's not part of this. So I would have skipped this myself if I had been transcribing this, because this S is very strange. So it is a sigma S, it's a small s, it's just leaning into the H. Which is very confusing. Also, this tail is connected up here, which is also not easy for us to read. So here's an H, O. Now we have this R again that we saw for 4. This is R. T, L, Y, shortly. F, O, R. Now we've just decided we're going to do all our R's differently, I guess. So this line gets all the different R's. So F-O-R. So for shortly 4 here. So that is your taste of Chaucer's work from around 1400. I know this was a little of a mind melt. So is there any chat questions really quick before we move on?
I thought it was fog. Ghostly fog, which is pretty metal.
I like that too. We could go with that. Yeah, it does look like G's. Yeah, I can see how those descenders could look like G's. Okay, we are going to move into Elizabethan handwriting. Okay, last one. All right, so this is a legal document from 1588. This is written in a style called secretary hand, and it is legal handwriting. So this is something that would have been a legal, important document, and it is from England. And this is one of the most challenging scripts that I have ever come across, and we are going to go slow through this one. We are going to use the rest of our time doing probably around 2 lines. It is tough. So if you have, I included these ABCs over here on the left. I included these in your packet. So if you printed those, definitely get those. They will help. So I'm going to go ahead and ease you in a little bit with line number 4 here. I'm going to zoom into line number 4. And I hope that this I hope this can help you. This is all context here. This is a date. This says 1588. So this is 1588. So then we can assume that in a record like this, this will be a month. So this is December 1588. So how is this December? So the D is missing that one piece that we make cursive Ds with, but this big swirl is part of a cursive D that we know now. I don't know if I would have been able to get this one on my own. That one was a tough one. But then we go into E. So E's, if you look over here in this sheet, E's have lots of different forms, and some of them don't look like E's. Some of them have a horn on top. One of my teachers called it a horn, where it's a C shape down here and then a little curl up here. So that is probably this one or maybe this one. This is where this sheet comes in really handy because secretary E's are tough. So we have an E, and then this looks like an R, right? But December has a C in it. So let's go look at our secretary C's. Guess what? None of the secretary C's look like modern C's at all. They all look like R's. So this is where when you're reading secretary, you have to remember when I see an R, you have to think C. You have to replace them in your brain as you go. And the more you read something like this, you do start to replace things. So this is E, C, E. Now that we know what those E's look like, and this R is actually a C, this is just R shaped. M, B, which I think are a little easier. And then we have another E, which is very similar to these two E's. And then finally, we have a second one that looks very curious. So on first encounter, I would say this looks like a W, but December ends with an R. So this is what one of my teachers called a bucket R. We're gonna go down here to where the R's variants are, and you can see there is an R that starts up top, goes down, up a little, down a little, and then back up again. So we're like a bucket shape, and that is a very typical secretary R. So now that we're feeling real great about all of the things we thought we knew about R's and C's, we're gonna dig a little bit into line number 1. We're only gonna do a few minutes of this, and then I'm gonna have you guys do a few words on your own because this is extremely difficult, and I don't expect you to get too far in the couple minutes. So it's better to do most of them together. Yes, so we're gonna start at line 5 because the top part is all these like pleasantries and like formalities, and there are a bunch of proper names, and there's no way we're gonna know what they are because proper names and spelling from the 1500s is really tough. So we're gonna start here. This is a capital letter, and actually this happens a lot. Capital letters get a dot on them. This is also very flourishy, so you can tell it's a capital. This is an H. You wouldn't necessarily know it's an H, but because of what's coming next, we can figure out this is an H. This big overreaching curl in the dot. So this is an H, and then we have an E here. So this is starting to look more like those backwards 3s. If we go back to our paleography E's here, here's one of those examples, like 2 little C's on top of each other. So he, and now we have something that looks like a giant P. We're gonna save that. We're gonna go back to that because we don't know what that is. So this is an A and then an I, and now we're starting dots. So we've started by the 1500s to dot our I's. So AI, and what did we just remember from before? This is an E, those 2 little C's on top of each other. E, T, cross here, tall ascender. All right, this, I'm not sure if this is going to click immediately with you, but this is an H. The top part here, pretty typical of what we've seen. The H usually stops around here. These secretary H's go nuts. They go way out here and way up here. And you can see the next one, same thing. This is still an H, even though it's got a whole tail that's doing its own thing. And if we go down, you can see this is an H, this is an H, this is an H. All these big loops, all of a sudden H's just start popping out at you everywhere. They are very unique to secretary, and they can trip you up for sure. So this is he, and then we have aeth. This is a long S. This is a capital though, so you wouldn't necessarily need to know this either. This is he saith. So once we get past the first capital stuff, this is an H, and now we know our double little C's here, that's an E. So he saith he. Okay, so we're gonna get 2 more words in, and then we're gonna let you guys try a couple on your own. Sorry, I keep going back and forth. Okay, so this is another challenge of secretary. This right here, it looks like maybe like an N and an O squished together. This is one letter, and it is a W. So if you look down on your writing sheet here, you can see W is a little less convoluted. This one is a great example of what we're looking at. It's way less curved on the bottom like we expect W's to be, and has a big big closed chamber on the end. So this is a W. These will trip you up over and over because it's so hard to remember that this is what a W looks like. And then we have an A and an S. So this is another one that is tough. This S is rough. Do we have an example? Yes, we do. So S's, just look at these secretary S's. We have 5 of them that look like big P's, that's the long S, and then we have 3 of them that look like 6s, which is a short S. So we have a short S. I hope I'm not making all of you cry yet. This is a tough one. W-A-S, this is was. All right, last word, and then you're gonna have to try a couple on your own. This one's a little bit easier. We can go by the dots. We can trust the I. M, 3 minims there. And then this is a P. We're still doing that crossbar we've seen in the other sessions where the P goes down at the descender and then the chamber goes across the P. And what did we learn this bucket was? This is an R. So this is something that looks like a W. It's the R, the bucket R. And then after that, we have our 2 little C's. That's an E. And then this big long stroke. This is that long S. This is going to get really common. You're going to see this now. We saw the long S here. We see the long S here. We're looking down. We see this long S, long S, long S. Big fancy stroke. It's a long S. And now we drag it into a T. So this is the word impressed. S-T. All right, so you guys are gonna try the next couple the next couple words. I'll go through the end of the sentence with you. I'm gonna stretch this out so you guys can see. And I'm gonna cover up, I guess I'll cover up part of this so you can still use these. Okay, so we're gonna start here at this. This was the letter we just finished the word before this. So if you want to try to do the end of line 5, and then we'll go over it together in 3 minutes. Actually, we'll give you a little bit less because this is rough. So let's do 2 minutes, and you can try to do the rest of line 5, and then we will talk about questions. There are 2 proper names in the rest of this line, 2 places. Okay, we have 30 more seconds. If you're already done, just take a breath. Is there any questions in the chat?
Did you say, does the long S versus the short S have something to do with how it was pronounced or just style preference?
It's totally a style preference. There's no rules about when it's used. It's not pronounced differently. In the Constitution, Congress is printed with a long S and a short S right next to each other. Or is it the Declaration? One of them has the long S and the short S right next to each other. So it's totally just a preference on when they wanted to use it. They are not different in terms of use. Okay, I think we're gonna go over the last part of this document, and then we're gonna call it a day. So you guys have been awesome. All right, so here is our first word. I definitely would not have known this letter off the top of my head, but looking at the Elizabethan ABCs over here, this is one of the ways they can make an A. So this word is at, A-T. And the next word here is a proper city name. So this is L. This is sort of similar to our cursive L now, except it's a little more straight. And this is a Y, a very curly Y. I think I created something. So this reaches way down here. Does this one say? Yeah, so the Elizabethan lowercase also shows us different little curls of Y's. Okay, and now we have a long S, Liz, and then this goes, the ascender goes into a B. So this is Lisbon. I-N, in. And here we have Spain. This is a big capital S, P-A-I-N-E. So here's that flourishy E spelled Spain with an E. Putting E's on the ends is very common. All right, we have another A here, this big strike up the top of the A, part of that A, N, D. This D is reaching way over. This is a medieval looking D, not at all what you would expect from something from this time period, but these Ds are very typical for secretary. And you can see over here, there's 5 types of Ds. They all look fairly different. This looks like one that is really common for this scribe. So this is a D. So that's and then our last 3 words, P-U-T, put, into, I-N-T-O, and here we have a regular old A. Okay, so that is line 5, and you guys were amazing. Thank you for surviving that with me. I know that was crazy. Is there chat questions?
No, I have a question.
Yes.
Is there a difference between, like, can you talk about F's versus T's in this? Because the T's look like F's for sure.
Okay, Peter wants to know F's versus T's. Let me see. Where's the F?
I haven't seen one yet.
Oh.
But the T's here look like an F. Straight up.
Okay, so here's an F. The F has a big loop on top. And this is where you can see this is a T. This is the word fight, F-I-G-H-T, spelled the way we spell it. This F has a big loop before it goes down and a big cross all the way through. So it's a totally different way. But until you learn, here's another one, here's another F. Until you learn that's how the F's look, you might think they look like T's because they have that curl. That flourish goes over the top. So that's why keeping your alphabet is really important, because you can document the different ways T's and F's look, and then you can remember to go back to them.